To the king! Severin heard the toast to the king even before he entered the throne room. The chamber would be near bursting by now, filled with nobles from throughout Ferelden who had arrived to honor the day of his majesty's birth. Honor, of course, might not be the word for it. The native Fereldans were terrified the king would strip them of their land as he had done to so many of their fellows in punishment for some crime, real or imagined. The Orlesians, those members of the aristocracy who had chosen to seek out their fortunes away from the empire and had been given those stripped lands, feared much the same. The king, after all, the king, after all, was a bored and capricious member of an ancient aristocracy who had been sent to assume the Ferelden throne only after angering the emperor, his first cousin, and so the scandalous rumor claimed, one-time lover, and now took out his own displeasure on subjects who had little choice but to bow to his whims. Severin had tactfully informed the king that the rebels might have been curbed by now if he just took a lighter hand with the locals. Despite his hatred of the rebels and embarrassment they represented, the king refused to heed the advice. He would do as he wished, and no one could tell him otherwise. Just as he did with his court, Severin thought, recalling how the king had tried to bring the Orlesian tradition of wearing masks to the Fereldans. He had declared that all members of the nobility would be required to wear as fancy and as beautifully adorned a mask as they could acquire, and that at the end of each court, the wearer of the mask that pleased him the least would be punished. Needless to say, the frantic run on masks and the demand for those who could make them almost resulted in riots in the streets. Finally, when a would-be assassin managed to slip into the palace by wearing such a mask, the commander of the royal guard begged the king to lift the edict for the sake of security. The collective sigh of relief when the king finally did so was almost palpable. King Megrin was a tyrant, and one did not honor those tyrants, and one did not honor tyrants. One appeased them. So the nobility put on a great show of adoration for their beloved monarch, their smiles a thin veneer covering their terror. The king, meanwhile, knew the nobles were acting. The nobility understood this, but also knew that the charade was required of them nevertheless. Such was a sad state of things in Orlesian-occupied Ferelden. Severin could not have cared less. He was from neither Ferelden nor Orlais, but from across the waking sea and far to the north, as his swarthy skin implied. He would have watched his own land be subjugated with no more than a raise of an eyebrow, for mages had no true home at all. His interests were his own, and the king accepted this. Severin's ambition was as reliable as the rising sun, and that was why he remained King Megrin's closest advisor. Amaranthine brings to its beloved king a sword of its finest silverite, fashioned in the dwarven halls of Orzammar. May it serve him well in the years to come, and offer proof to all of Thedas that his might cannot be denied. As Severin entered the throne room, he saw the young Arl was standing amid the rows and rows of nobles seated at their supper tables, giving an overdone speech as several elven servants scampered up to the throne to present a long ornate case to the king. King Megrin, meanwhile, was the very picture of boredom. He was slumped low in the throne, one leg thrown over an arm and propping up his head with a hand. The king was a handsome and virile young man, all dark curls and olive skin to go with what crooked sneer. Yet today he looked very much like someone who had overindulged for too many days non-stop, which was exactly the case. Megrin sighed heavily and stirred himself enough to sit up as this new gift was presented. The area immediately around the throne was already littered with other gifts, which had been ignored or discarded with little more than a shrug. Mother Bronach stood immediately behind the throne, scrutinizing the proceedings intensely. She was a severe woman, her face lined with cares of her office as the Grand Cleric of the Holy Chantry in Ferelden, and despite her small frame, she loomed as large in the chamber with her resplendent red vestments as the king did. Megrin rubbed his nose in rumpled velvet doublet and took the sword case from the prostrating elves, who immediately withdrew. Lifting the brilliant blade out of the case, Megrin gave it a few practice swings and regarded it with interest. Of the dwarven make, you say? The all, the all, the all bowed low. The all bowed low, sweating despite presumed pleasure that the king had deigned to take notice of his offering. Yes, your majesty, it was a gift from the king of the dwarves, made to the first of my line long ago. Ah, so then it was not made for me. A hush came over the chamber. General dinner conversation halted as nobility picked up on Megren's icy tone. The all blanched. It is of great value, he stammered. Never has a finer blade been made. I thought, surely you can see. Emperor Florian, he has given me a blade, the king interrupted. He swung the Severite sword idly to one side of the throne, each swing like a slow pendulum slicing at some invisible head. Made by the finest crafters in the Val Royale, it is a thing of great grace and beauty. Shall I inform him, then, that you consider your blade to be superior? The owl's eyes went wide. No, Perhaps it is in your opinion I should return to him the gift. After all, there is no point in keeping the inferior blade to collect dust, is there? The entire chamber was silent now. The Jarl glanced about the room, pleading with his eyes for help from the assembled nobles, but everyone was looking elsewhere. He suddenly dropped to one knee, lowering his head. Forgive me, your majesty. It was a presumptuous gift. I apologize. Megren smirked and looked up as Mother Bronek stepped forward from behind the throne. Severin despised the woman utterly, a feeling that was mutual. If I may offer a suggestion, your majesty, she asked. The king waved his assent. Yes, of course. If the blade is as valuable as the all suggests, a gift made of it to the chantry would do much to prove Amaranthine's piety in these dark times. There is much that remains to be done, after all, before the holy braziers of Ferelden shine with the glory that befits a great nation. How true, the king cooed. He arched a brow at the Jarl. So how will you have it, your grace? Shall you instead give your blade to Mother Bronek? The Jarl's bow was quick and breathless. Of course, your majesty. Mother Bronek snapped her fingers at two palace servants that stood nearby. They rushed forward and gently took the sword from King Megren, placing it back in the case and running off while the mother watched. Once they were gone, she bowed low to the king. The thought is most appreciated, your majesty. He sighed and turned his attention back to the Jarl, who remained bowed. So what will you do now, your grace? Can this mean you have no birthday gift for the king? Shocked, the Jarl opened his mouth several times as if to speak, but no sound came forth. The silence in the hall became excruciating. Not a single fork or knife touching a single plate. The several Elysian chevaliers, the elite knights of the empire, easily distinguished by their bright purple tunics and feathered hats, stepped forward with their hands on their sword hilts. Megren suddenly laughed, a maniacal sound that cut through the hush in the hall. He continued to laugh until the assembled nobles slowly joined him. They twittered uncertainly at first, and then became louder and louder. Megren clapped his hands as the room roared with amusement. The Jarl of Amaranthine remained quiet, sweat pouring down his brow. I jest, my friend, the king declared. You must forgive me. Such a gift made to the chantry in my name? What more could I ask? The Jarl bowed low, his head almost touching the floor. I am relieved, your majesty. Still chuckling, Megren clapped his hands loudly to signal that the merriment should continue. Come, friends, eat, drink. Our celebration, it continues, and is the sweeter now that the head of the pretender witch sits on a pole outside the gate. Is she not the pretty one? He roared with laughter again, the nobles joining in too quickly. And refresh the Jarl's goblet. These robes, they are obviously too hot. The feast resumed, and Severin took the opportunity to cross the chamber toward the throne, the stench of wine and sweat thickly in the air. A number of men and women quickly averted their gaze as he passed, becoming entirely interested in the pheasant on their plate or whoever was seated next to them. Severin understood. The chantry had done its best throughout the ages to ensure that mages were vilified and held responsible for every catastrophe to have befallen mankind. To think that once mages had ruled all over Thedas and were now barely tolerated to think that To think that once mages had ruled all over Thedas and were now barely tolerated servants monitored by the Chantry's watchdogs. A sad plight to be sure. King Megrin brightened when he saw his advisor approaching. Mother Bronek did exactly the opposite. Her scowl twisting the lines of her face into something entirely unattractive. Can you not even leave your king to enjoy a single celebration in peace, mage? She murmured icily. Must you darken his hall with so many guests about? Now, Megrin chuckled. Do not be so hard on our den friend, the mage. He works very hard for his sovereign. Is it not so? Severin lowered his head and bowed, the silk of his yellow robe shimmering. With his hair thinning and his features made entirely of sharp angles, he was nowhere near as handsome as the king. The finest compliment Severin had ever received was from a young prostitute who had said he looked clever, that his tiny eyes could seize her, chew her up, and spit her out, all with one single gaze. He had liked that so much he waited until the morning to have her dragged off to prison. I have news, your majesty, he said. Could you not have sent a messenger? Mother Bronek asked, the chill remaining in her voice. When I have news for you, dear woman, I will always send a messenger. Megrin slowly sat up and yawned, rubbing his bloodshot eyes and blinking rapidly. He stood, straightening his rumpled doublet and waving to his servants not to follow. Then let us be quick. He walked off, Mother Bronek and Severin following quickly and leaving the noise of the throne room behind. The sitting room was used as a retreat for more private audiences. Megrin had the sturdy and practical Ferelden furniture replaced by more ornate Orlesian furnishings, all mahogany and bright satins that were works of art on their own. Vivid red paper covered the walls, a practice Severin knew was becoming popular in the Empire. Megrin threw himself down upon a padded settee, yawning again and rubbing his forehead. Is this what passes for an evening of an entertainment in this backwater? Did you hear the musicians they brought in? Severin shook his head. Before or after you sent them running from the chamber? Bah! What would I not give for a real orchestra or a masquerade? The country's lords I am sent from Orlais would not know a proper boss dance if it kicked them in the arse. He snorted with derision and sat up, glaring at Severin. Do you know what one of those local fools from the Bandon gave me? Dogs. A pair of filthy dogs. Hounds are valued in Ferelden, Mother Bronek interjected, her voice laden with disapproval. Those were warhounds, a mating pair. From such a minor band, it was a gift that showed great respect, your majesty. Great fear, more like. He sniffled, barely mollified. I'm sure it was some kind of insult, giving me beasts still half covered in dung. All of those backward fools in the Bandon are alike. It is indeed sad that you must be inflicted with so much dung on your birthday, your majesty, Severin said calmly. Megrin threw his hands up and sighed. Tell me, good mage, the news you carry is a response from our emperor. Severin hesitated. I do have a response, yes, but that is not... Nothing is more urgent than a letter from Florian. Severin straightened his robes, steeling himself. His Imperial Majesty sends his regrets. He is certain that your duties will continue to hold you in Ferelden, and so there is no place within the Imperial Court for you now. Megrin sank into the cushions. Still no forgiveness then. Severin almost sighed in relief. Some days a letter from the Emperor could result in a tantrum or far worse. But not today, evidently. You were expecting a different response than the last 14 attempts, he asked reprovingly. I am the eternal optimist, good mage. The definition of insanity, your majesty, is to perform the same action repeatedly and expect different results. Megrin tittered with amusement. You are calling me insane? Insanely persistent. Mother Bronek's lips thinned. You are still a king, your majesty. Better didn't have made a lowly baron in the provinces, the king complained. Then I could still keep a house in Val Royeaux, still visit the Grand Cathedral. He sighed heavily. Ah, well, I may be the king of a backwater, but at least it is my backwater, yes? Shall I begin another response? 15 times the charm. 15 times the charm, Severin asks. Perhaps later. We shall see if we can wear him down, yes? He then considered for a moment, and his look became serious. Now then, this news you carry, is it from the hinterlands? Indeed. Well, out with it. Severin took a deep breath. This information I received was accurate. The rebel army was exactly where it was supposed to be. The attack, however, did not have the result I wished. Many were killed, but the rebels slipped the noose. Megren's brows shot up. Oh? There is more. Prince Maric lives and is with the rebels. He led a distraction and held out with a handful of men atop a cliff before escaping with the rest of his army. Severin held out a large scrap of cloth. It was tattered and soiled, but the deep purple color could still be seen. The rebels were inspired, rather than dispirited. Nettled, the king frowned at Severin as his fingers drummed on the arm of the settee. Inspired, you told me he would not be there. The boy was supposed to be killed along with his mother. He was tracked to a camp of outlaws, Severin answered slowly. They were slaughtered, but somehow he escaped into the wilds and survived. So I am to understand this correctly. Megrin continued to drum his fingers up, his tone irritable. The boy, the incompetent prince, managed not only to escape your men in the forest, but trekked through the wilds and appeared safe and sound, just in time to lead the spirited defense of the rebel army. I am as incredulous as you, your majesty. Mother Bronek's face was hard with anger. His spells bring you nothing, King Megrin. Throw him out. He serves his pride and nothing else. And what have you done for the throne except provide a string of platitudes, each more useless than the last, while you demand tribute for your hungry flames? Her eyes went wide with outrage. The Maker will never allow Ferelden to prosper while it keeps such cancer in its very heart. Your Maker is gone. As is said in your chant of light, he abandoned his own creation and has no care for anything further. So spare us your useless prattle, woman. Blasphemy! She roared. Silence, Migrin shouted, his face twisted in fury. Mother Bronek calmed reluctantly in response as the king rubbed his face in agitation. You said that without their beloved queen, the rebels, they will be done, Severin. You said you could wipe them out with one blow. Yes, your majesty. Pride, the priest declared. Megrin raised a hand to cut off Severin's reply. Obviously, this boy Maric is more than you assumed. Perhaps Severin was not ready to assume the opposite was true just yet either. It is also possible that he found help somehow. He certainly has the support of the Queen's lieutenants. The daughter of the former Isle of Redcliffe, Lady Rowan, is said to have slain your cousin Felix in the battle, for instance. Rolled him down in cold blood. Felix? Megrin shrugged. I never liked that one. Still, the backbone of the rebels proved to be far stiffer than I had imagined. I do apologize for my mistake, your majesty. He bowed his head down low. I asked for another chance. Megrin grinned slyly. You have something in mind? The young king chuckled and glanced over at the Grand Clare, who stared intently down at her hands folded in her lap. I suppose your advice is the same as always, my sweet lady. Marry a daughter of Ferelden, she said wearily, marry a daughter of Ferelden, she said wearily, as she had said this many times before, and produce a child. You cannot rule this country until you are truly its king. All humor vanished from the king. He glared at Mother Bronek, who paled but did not flinch. I rule this country, he snapped, and I am its king. You would do well to remember this. I speak from the perspective of your people, your majesty. They are good, simple folk who could accept you. They are ignorant fools, he snapped, and they will accept me because they have no choice. So long as the chevaliers remain, so do I, he calmed, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Then he turned back to Severin. You have another chance, good mage. We will do things your way the once more, but only because I have no wish to marry some dog-faced local. That is clear? Severin bowed again. I will not fail you, your majesty. Severin returned to his quarters deep within the palace, greatly relieved Megrin had sent him Severin returned to his quarters deep within the palace, greatly relieved Megran had not sent him back to the circle of Magi. Within the circle, under the watchful gaze of the Chantry's Templars, his every spell would be scrutinized and monitored. At least in King Megran's employ he had power, even if he had to choose it carefully. Men like Megran were permitted by the circle to have one of their mages as an advisor under the condition that the mage was watched by the Chantry. Megran could defy Megran Bonarch's wishes only to a point. He cursed whatever luck he had allowed Prince Maric to ruin his plan. It had been an excellent one. The Theron bloodline and the rebellion both wiped out. The king would have been allowed to return to the imperial court, and Severin, the hero of the day, might even been left as governor. But now he had to try again. Severin's quarters were dark, as befitted his mood. With a wave of his hand, the lantern hanging by the door flared brightly. As the room was bathed in firelight, he noticed a figure leaning against one of the posts of his great bed. "Greetings, my lord mage." It was an elven woman, beautiful in the way that only her kind could be, with porcelain skin and slanted eyes and impossible green. This one was dressed in leathers that accentuated her curves, and her golden honey curls cascaded around her shoulders artfully. She was a spy, of course. The fact that he could see the dangers sheathed at her waist meant she was not here to kill him, or he assumed. If he was wrong on that point, she was certainly welcome to try. "Do you always enjoy standing in dark rooms?" Walking into his quarters, he brushed by her and quickly gathered up the many papers that were spread over his desk. She chuckled, watching him with keen interest. "If my purpose here was to read your precious letters, do you not think I would already have done so, my lord?" "Perhaps you did. If so, then I should have executed you, no? I am here at your invitation." He put down the paper slowly, nodding. "You are the bard, then?" "I am," she bowed politely. Our mutual friend in Valchevon sends his regards just as he sends me." Severin stepped toward her, taking her delicate chin in his hand and turning her face from side to side to scrutinize her more closely. She did not bat an eyelash. "He sent an elf, did he? You seem very tarted up for one of your station." "I can be less so, my lord." "Of that I have no doubt." Bards in Olay had a notorious reputation. They masqueraded as minstrels or actors, traveling from court to court in the empire ostensibly to entertain their noble patrons while plying their true trade and secrets. Politics in the empire were a devious business, and thus bars were never in short supply. One would think the nobility would simply stop receiving entertainers altogether, but the truth was that the possibility of any traveling minstrel being a dangerous spy added an exotic allure. That a nobleman might be important enough to be spied upon and courageous enough to take in a possible spy made the temptation too much for any self-respecting aristocrat to bear. "If my lord believes an elf cannot do as he needs," she began. "No," he released her chin. "Simply remember your place. I have a contract with your master, and that means you are now mine." His gaze was steel, and he was pleased to see that she did not flinch. He wondered if there was a single elf in Ferelden who could manage the same. Succeed in your task and you will be rewarded. Fail and you will end up begging for scraps in the alienage along with your fellows, wishing you had stayed in Orlais. Is that sufficiently clear? She went silent for a moment, her face assuming a calm veneer. Stiffly, she bowed to him again. "I understand," she said smoothly. "I am told the contract is for a single task, yes?" Stepping away from him, she perched on the edge of the bed and regarded him with an artful, come-hither look. "Is it to be something of a personal nature?" "No need to exert yourself for my benefit," he waved her off contemptuously. "Do you know who Prince Maric is?" The elven woman paused, thinking. "Yes, I think I do," she said, her tone now all business. "The son of the proper Queen of Ferelden? Out hiding with her in the wilderness somewhere? Is that so? The rebel queen is dead. You might have seen her head outside the gates." "Is that what that was?" "It was looking a little green and putrid. Queen wasn't the first word that came to mind." Nevertheless, the boy is her heir, and he is alive. I need you to get close to him. The elf considered the idea, twirling one of her locks between her fingers thoughtfully. That will take time. Time we have. And we are to negotiate my reward then? Complete your task first, he said dismissively. Afterwards, King Megrin can and will provide whatever reward you desire. She stood from the bed. She stood from the bed and then bowed again, this time low and servile. Then it seems you have a bard at your disposal, my lord. Severin nodded. Please. One more chance, then, to destroy the rebellion. In the distance, he heard the muffled sounds of forced laughter in the throne room. The laughter was punctuated by someone screaming in pain, probably for Megrin's amusement. It was the only reason the king delighted in such gatherings. Someone always had to suffer before the night was through. Someone always suffered.